So you've completed the quiz. Let's talk through them. Number one, what was the question?
What's the definition of net worth?
Define net worth. So what do you get, anybody? So you must have written something. What'd you write?
Assets
minus liabilities.
Okay, assets minus liabilities is equal to net worth. What you own less what you owe is what you're worth on paper. Is that what the business is worth? A definite maybe, right? That might be what it's worth. Could it be worth less? Yeah. Could it be worth more? You'd hope, wouldn't you? Selling it at, this is called book value, isn't it? This is what the accountants use because they want to keep everything straight. What you own less what you owe is what you're worth on paper. That's kind of our formal definition. What's a more practical definition that I suspect some of you wrote? It's worth what I could sell it for. Is that in fact true? Is what you can sell it for what it's worth? It's worth what I can sell it for. Is that what it's worth? A definite maybe. A whole lot of businesses are sold on a contract, aren't they? Because most buyers don't have enough money. So I'll give you some money down and I'll pay you out of time. I'll pay you over time out of what? The cash flow of the business. It does have cash flow, doesn't it? And when people are selling, what do they say? Oh yeah, it's got great cash flow. It's got great cash flow when they're selling. And it's got a whole lot of, what's the word? Potential. Isn't that a great word? What does potential mean?
It means if you really work really hard, you might make $1.
It means if you work really hard, you might make $1. A lot of times what I found when somebody's selling is, it means, I couldn't do it, you have a go. That right? That's sort of like in real estate when it says it has a territorial view. What does that sometimes mean? You're looking into your neighbor's living room, right? Depending on the territory. So it's got kind of several meanings to it. Is your business for sale? I've had people say, oh no, it isn't. So we could just test that. I have $24 million. Is your business for sale? The answer is probably, isn't that right? Yeah. Probably. In other words, it might not be for sale, but it could be bought, couldn't it? It could be bought. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy Randy's business. And what I'll do is give you some money down. And again, I'll pay you over time out of the cash flow of the business. And if it wasn't worth what he sold it to me for, what happens? Oh, we've got a contract here, don't we? That's what's going to do this exchange is I'm going to take over the business, and I'm going to give him some money down, and there's going to be a contract, and I'm paying him over time. And what's the collateral on the contract? The business. And if it wasn't worth what he sold it to me for, what happens? He gets it back. And how does it look when he gets it back? What'd you say?
Worse than when I gave it to you.
Not as good as when you sold it, right? He gets it back. Did he want it back? No. The act of selling is like what? Checking out. I'm out of here. Been there, done that. It's over. I didn't want it back. I'm gone. I'm down in Southern California, or I'm down in Sanibel Island or somewhere in my retirement, and now I got to come back and start it over. I don't want it back. So a business is worth what you can sell it for as long as you can do what? Collect. As long as you can collect, it's worth what you can sell it for, isn't it? Bank has a definition of net worth. What is it? Well, along about 15 years ago, we changed in banking the way, it was changed in banking the way they evaluate performance. They came and they said that they put together a class, not dissimilar to this actually. They put together a class and all the bankers went and they came back And businesses before that, before this class, had been valued, when you read the stock report, and a stock has a price, it's $34 a share. What is that price? How does that price come about? It's some multiple of what? The per share earnings of the company, isn't it? So it's a value that's built around profit. Now all the bankers went in and they said, well, we'd actually prefer to get paid in what? Cash. They came back and they said to their customers, now, we are what kind of lenders? Cash flow lenders. And all the business owners in America looked at all their bankers and they went, what does that mean? And they said, we don't know, it's the first course. But it sounds really good. Now, profits or cash? Do you need profits or cash in a business? You need both, the absence of which will get you quicker. Cash. That's like a coronary. The absence of profits will get you, but it takes longer. It's sort of like a long-term disease, isn't it? So if you're not planning on going, or I guess the question is, how do you want to go? Fast or slow? And if you don't want to go at all, we got two cycles to manage, a profit cycle and a cash cycle. And finally, and we're going to talk quite a lot about that as we go through this course. This is going to be a really important part of what we do. And finally, a more drastic way to find out what your business is worth. You could what? You could die. And then who will help you? I'm from the IRS. I'm here to help you. I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. Does the IRS know what your business is worth? Not really? So what do? They guess. And they normally guess how? High. And then you go to court and fight with them about the value. If you happen to be the business owner, what's your problem in fighting with them about the value? You're dead. That's a significant problem. In fact, you've left it to whom? Someone else. And my point is, we have different definitions of value, don't we? You're selling it. You want what kind of a value? A high value. You're paying taxes, or you're paying death taxes. You want what? It's worth less. You're getting divorced. It's worth nothing. Value, as it turns out, depends on the circumstances. But what we can count on is cash flow. Cash flow isn't situational. You've either what? Got it or you don't. It's either in your wallet or it isn't. That will work out pretty well as we go down the track. All right. Now, what was the second question? WC, what is it? Working capital. Working capital. And what'd you write? Anybody, what'd you write? Give me one definition.
Funds we use to operate.
Money, okay, that's great. Money to operate. If I've got money to operate, I must have working capital. Exactly. I've also seen some people define it this way. If I've got money in the till, I've got working capital. Is that true? Yeah. To some degree it is true, isn't it? A more formal definition that oftentimes gets used. What is it? Anybody use a more formal definition? What was it?
Current assets minus.
Oh yes, current assets minus current liabilities. The accountant's definition, what does that mean? Current assets minus current liabilities. What does that mean? Money to operate. But it's a fancier way of saying it, isn't it? A couple of definitions that we'll have to do as in each of the sections of this course. We'll have a few definitions in a glossary that we need to review. Not a lot, just a few, but there's every course of study has its language, doesn't it? And finance is no different. Current asset. We know an asset is something a business what? Owns, exactly. So what's a current asset besides something it currently owns? Cash, or something that will be converted to cash within what time period that we've selected? 1 year. In other words, that's the money coming in. Isn't that right? Current liabilities must therefore be the money going out in the next year, when what's coming in is greater than what's going out. What kind of working capital? When what's coming in is greater than what's going out. Positive. When what's going out is greater than what's coming in. What kind of working capital? Negative. Is it possible to have negative working capital? Not for long periods. Isn't that right? But it is possible. What do you think of someone who asks you a question when you're talking to them? They ask you this question: is it possible to have positive working capital? That's typically a bad sign, isn't it? If you have a situation where you have permanent negative working capital, what does that make you? Broke. I've always said it makes you a government. They have permanent negative working capital, but they have an advantage over most of us. When they're short, what do? Print it. If you print it, it has significant negative consequences, doesn't it? That's the model we're looking at. Now, what we're going to try to figure out is, how does that flow through a business? So we're going to call on what we call the working capital cycle. Money flows through a business, and this is going to prove to be very important in how a business runs, when it grows, when it shrinks. It's very important to the financial community in terms of what funds will be required of this business. We're going to start with cash, and what do we typically do with it? We invest it in what? Inventory. Inventory. And then what happens? It sits there for a while, and then what do? We sell it. And if we don't get cash, we get a promise to pay. And what do we call that? A receivable. And back to cash, the working capital cycle. Now, some people, does every business have a working capital cycle? Yes. Of course they do. Although I've had folks say to me, no, my business is different. An attorney, do they have a working capital cycle? Of course they do. I had one person tell me, no, our business is different. We don't have what? Inventory in a law firm, isn't that right? And they always say it like they've been cheated. It's okay not to have inventory because it doesn't rot and no one steals it. Isn't that right? And the interesting irony is they do have inventory. What is it? What's the inventory in a law firm, or frankly any service business? Time. So much tougher to manage than something that is tangible that we can bundle. Time slips through your hands, so how do we measure it? How do we measure time in a service business? Pardon me? Productivity is exactly the measure of time. In an accounting firm, billable hours. In a law firm, billable minutes. They got a little bit fun. Anyway, we've got to have some measure of productivity because time is our inventory. We still have a working capital cycle because many of those law firms have what? Significant amounts of receivables. Likewise, if you're a cash-based business, you don't carry what? Receivables, do you? A grocery store in rural America, they would tell me, no, our working capital cycle, we don't have one. Well, of course they have one, it's just different. And why would they say they don't have one in a grocery store? We don't have receivables. But I'm guessing they do. If we go lift up the till box is how we find receivables in a grocery store. And what do we find? We'll find scraps of paper. One of them is rectangular like that, and one of them is sort of irregular like that. On this scrap of paper, what three vowels? IOU. Now we've got the grocer being what? A banker. And depending on where we are in the country and how seasonal the economy is in particular locations, that can be pretty big. That can be pretty big. This other more rectangular piece of paper, what three letters does it have stamped on the back? And they're consonants, not vowels. N, S, F. What did it do? Bwah, bwah, bwah. It bounced. And in fact, if there are two of them, they're probably not in the till box. They're taped on the side of the till with a note that says, has anyone seen him? The fact is, we've got a working capital cycle here, don't we? And we're particularly concerned about this when the business grows or shrinks. If the sales are flat, it's relatively stable. But when it grows, what happens to that cycle? It expands also. Let's just take a quick review. Cash to what? Inventory to receivables and back to cash, or some version of that, huh? Some version of that. Everybody's got a working capital cycle. What's the challenge? To know it, first of all, understand it, and manage it. Absolutely. Okay, question number 3. Was it 3? What was the question?
What is the gross profit?
Yeah, what it cost. You sell binders. They cost you $4. You want to sell them at a price such that you achieve a 26% gross profit margin, right? What do you sell them for? Huh? What do you sell them for? Answers.
$5.40.
Here's let me tell you the range of answers I've gotten over the past 2 decades. I'll start at the high and go to the low. $13.71, $12.86, $11.90, $8.58, $7.60, $5.41, $5.04, and $3.75. Contractor. You just got to do what? A lot of work. Following what time-honored principle that we'll revisit in section 3?
Make it up on volume.
Lose a little on each sale and make it up on volume. Tough to do, isn't it? People keep trying it. Maybe that has something to do with the 80%. I don't know. We'll spend a lot of time talking about pricing. So, I asked 2 questions. What is the right answer, and what's the most common wrong answer? I have had people get the same number for both A and B. That's usually not correct. Here's what people often do. They'll take $4, multiply it by 1.26, and get what? 504. Now, that is the right answer to which question?
B.
B. It's the most common wrong answer. Historically, what I've found is roughly 30% of the business community gets the wrong answer. And that's a bad thing, especially when figuring out the right answer is so easy. It's so straightforward. So what I want to do is just now. If people don't know it, it's not easy, is it? They've confused what 2 concepts if they got 504 instead of what is the right answer? 541. If they got 504 instead of 541, they've confused what 2 concepts?
Margin and markup.
504 instead of 541. And how did you get 541? And somebody talk me through the right answer. What'd you do to get 541?
I divided $4 by 0.7.
There are two ways to do this, aren't there? One is to use your magic retailer's wheel, which you all have there. You put $4 on the outside scale, you dial up 26% and read off of the arrow 541. Pretty easy. Now, if by chance you lose your wheel, or if you never had it to begin with, you have to actually know how to do it. So let's draw a picture. What we're going to find is, I'm a big proponent of drawing pictures, okay? So here we go. Sales is 100%. Cost of goods sold is how much? What was the cost?
26%.
What was the cost in dollars? $4, exactly. And the gross profit margin target that we were shooting for was 26%. So if I started with $1 and I wound up with 26 cents, how much had to go away? 74 cents. And what you said was $4 is 74% of what? And what was the answer?
541.
541. Now if you got 504 instead of 541, you've confused two common terms in finance, haven't you? What were they? Markup and margin. Markup is going up the P&L, isn't that right? And you can't spend money going up the P&L. You can only spend money coming what? Down the P&L. You can only spend money coming down the P&L. Markup gets you to a selling price. Margin gets you where? To the bank. You can spend margin dollars. You can't spend markup dollars. People keep trying, but they just are not possible to spend. 541, got to have it. A good thing to do is to test everyone you work with. Just ask them a simple question. It's not knowing the answer that's bad. It's what? Continuing to not know the answer. There's a tremendous difference between being stupid and being uneducated, isn't there? Uneducated simply means what? We haven't been exposed to the information yet. That's what we're trying to do, is provide tools. And with the people you work with, just help them. Just help them. You can use there's a section in your book that says markup versus margin, and you can actually just go through. I've got a little 3-page diagram, and the fact is, you can use that to hand out to people, to check with your employees, to refresh yourself. A lot of ways to use this, all right? Markup versus margin. Right answer? 541. Most common wrong answer? 504. And a whole raft of other answers that somehow creeped in there that I'm not sure where actually they came from. Perhaps wishful thinking, or maybe hope, the hope part of it. All right. Now, last question. What was the last question? 3 uses of net profit. 3 uses for net profit. Somebody give me one.
Working capital.
More
Reserve.
Sorry?
More inventory.
In other words, more inventory is one thing, and working capital would be the same thing. What are we going to use it for? We're going to reinvest somewhere in the business, aren't we? We're going to reinvest in the business, meaning we're going to buy assets. We're going to buy assets. What kind of assets? Inventory, receivables, anything we own we have to buy. What else? Buildings, furniture and equipment, all those things. Vehicles, we got to buy them. What's the second thing we can do with profits? And by the way, I mean profits AT, which is what? After tax. I know that we pay tax on it. as to what someone told me. Of course, if you don't have any profits, you don't have to pay any tax. But then you can't what? Reinvest. You have nothing to reinvest. What's the second thing we're going to do?
Reduce liabilities.
Take it home. Take it home. What's the fancy financial term? Dividends, vacation, boats, second homes, all those things. Take it home, and then you can do anything you want with it. And what's the third thing? This always seems to be third. Why is that? Repay debt. Repay debt. Now, when I talk to a group of bankers, they'll get the same three answers in a slightly different order. Where will bankers put number 3? Up in number 1. Where will they put number 2? Where will they put take it home? Down in number 4. And there isn't one. Now, what I'd ask you to think about for a moment, just in your mind's eye, those are the 3 uses for profits. I'd ask you in your mind's eye to figure out and answer the question, rank order them. Which is most important to you? Put them in a priority sequence. In fact, I'll tell you what, just write it down. Just write down the priority sequence for you. It won't take you but about 15 seconds. Now, just take a glance at your partner's paper. See if they wrote this. Did they have the same order as you had? Sometimes yes, and sometimes what? No. We have several options here, don't we? We have several ways we could put these together in different orders. What would determine how each of us does that for ourselves? What would determine that?
What your values are for it.
What your what?
What your values
What your values are. Meaning if you grew up in a very conservative part of the world, don't owe nobody nothing, right? Don't borrow. People who grew up in the Great Depression, who lost their land. I know why I lost it. I what? I couldn't pay the mortgage. Don't owe nobody nothing. How long does that stick with you? Well, values stick with you forever, don't they? What else could drive how you organize these? Would your age have an impact? The older we get, most of us get more conservative. I'd like to be out of debt. It's when we're young that we want to, we say, oh, we've got how much time? Forever. And then what happens? You blink, isn't that right? Yeah. You blink and 30 years goes by. Point being, in the long run, as we go through this program, we need enough profits to do which of those 3? We need enough profits out of the business to do which of those 3? All 3. We have 3 masters to serve. And the interesting thing is, we can identify how much we need in each case. And that will help us do what? Set goals. Create a plan and set goals. By the way, if we manage the business to have no profits, so we pay no tax, which of those 3 can't you do? You can't do none of them. You can't do none of them. But you especially can't. We'll see what happens as we try to grow a business from the standpoint of where are the profits to do so, okay? And we can measure this process. In fact, my word for the course, the entire course, if you want to be able to manage something, you've got to be able to what? Measure. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, huh? And my customers, when I worked at the bank, when I said measure, that was my byline. And that's really what this course is all about, is measuring. They said, measure what? And what's the answer? Well, what I said was, measure performance. And they said, great. How do you do that? And I said, well, you measure the key drivers of performance. And that's what we've set this program up to do. And they said, the key drivers of what? And the third part of this, measure the key drivers of NP, which is what? And CF. That's going to be our program. In fact, that process works so well, we used to do that, as I said, in the credit department at the bank, that we put an umbrella over that and gave it a name. We called it Profit Mastery. Those are measuring the key drivers. Now, in this first section, we've got a series of resource materials, a checklist, if you will, for you. You don't need to take it out right now, but what I want you to know is we're going to look at three things in terms of planning properly at the beginning. And in fact, what I've heard said is a whole lot of business owners spend too much time working in the business and not enough time working on it. And the question of always gets asked, well, how do you work on it? And my view is those 7 steps we've talked about will help us work on the performance of the business. And that's where we want to go with this whole course, section by section, is measuring the performance of the business. This checklist that you've got in there, in terms of startup, 4 areas. Liability, who's on the hook for this when we sign loans, etc. Control, who owns the company. Benefits, what sort of benefits package have we put together for both ourselves and the employees. And finally, taxes. So 4 areas, and we've got a little checklist, and it's really a good checklist to go through on a regular basis. With whom? Between you and whom? What? Your accountant, perhaps even your attorney, your professional advisors. Great time to talk to them. When? Before. Before there's an issue instead of when? After. By that time, oftentimes it's too late. So take a look at this resource material. Check and just ask yourself, read the questions. We framed them in the form of a question. Ask yourself if you're taken care of. If you were my customer when I worked at the bank, we'd meet twice a year. If you remember, I said that. Who would we invite along to that meeting if they chose to come and you chose to invite them? Your accountant and your attorney. That way we have the entire professional advisory team and we can be on the same sheet of music. And that's what we want to do. We want to be on the same sheet of music in terms of the bank, our professional advisors, and these Profit Mastery resources are a way to help us do that. Oh, by the way, we had an extra credit question. MB or PB? Just a quick show of hands. How many MBs? Tell them, somebody.
There's no mom.
No such thing as a mama bull. Absolutely. At least not that I'm aware of. My point here is not to trick you. There is nothing in this course that is set up to trick you. We've worked very hard over the last 2 decades to put the materials together in a way that you can use it when you leave the program and apply it to your business right away, okay? Every once in a while, communication being what it is, a mama bull might pop out of my mouth. If it does, stop, ask a question, because we'll get it clarified, okay? If there are issues, questions, we didn't leave anything for us to be, not like a consultant where we tell part of the story. We've told the whole story here, and we've laid out all the tools. By the time you leave, we want you to have all of these tools in your toolkit, all right? And when we come back, we'll dive into the material, into the financial statement and take a trip through it.